The rain fell like silver needles that morning, slicing through the heavy air as mourners in black gathered around a marble coffin. A golden plaque glimmered faintly through the mist. Evelyn Moore, beloved daughter visionary, gone too soon. Cameras flashed, umbrellas clustered, and whispers rippled to the crowd like waves against stone. At the very front, Richard Moore, a billionaire known for his steel-cold demeanor and empire of luxury hotels, stood motionless, eyes fixed on the coffin. His face was unreadable, yet his knuckles were white around the single white rose he held. To the world, it looked like grief. To those who truly knew him, it was guilt, the kind that burned quietly and endlessly. As the priest began his final words, a low murmur broke from the back. Someone was shouting, hoarse, broken, desperate. "Stop! Don't bury her. She's not dead." Every head turned. A man stumbled forward from beyond the gates, dirty clothes clinging to his thin frame, hair soaked and tangled. His face was partly hidden beneath the hood of a worn jacket, but his eyes burned with something fierce and unexplainable. The guards moved quickly. "Get him out of here," one barked, but the man fought against their grip, his voice rising through the storm. "You're making a mistake. Evelyn Moore's alive." The crowd gasped. Even the priest hesitated, glancing nervously at Richard. The billionaire's jaw tightened, his voice cutting like ice. Who let this vagrant in? But the homeless man ignored him. He dropped to his knees before the coffin, pressing his ear to the sleek surface. "She's breathing," he whispered. "I can hear her." For a heartbeat, silence fell. Then laughter, soft, disbelieving, escaped one of the guests. "He's delusional," someone muttered. "Security, please." But the man's trembling hands were already unsealing the bouquet of lilies that had been placed atop the coffin. He tore them away, pounding the wood. "Evelyn! Evelyn, it's me, Daniel." Richard froze. The name hit him like thunder. "Daniel," he repeated quietly, his face paling. The man lifted his head, eyes blazing. "Yes, Daniel Reeves. You thought I died 10 years ago when you left me on that construction site. But I didn't, and neither did she." The storm seemed to stop breathing. The cameras turned. A name long buried in scandal, in silence, had risen again. Richard's voice dropped into a dangerous calm. "This is madness. My daughter drowned in that car accident 3 days ago. I saw her body." Daniel shook his head violently. "No, you saw what they wanted you to see. Evelyn's heart was still beating when they took her from the car. I followed them. The hospital. They declared her dead too soon. You buried her alive." The priest stumbled backward, clutching his rosary. "That's impossible. Check her pulse." Daniel shouted. "For God's sake, just check." The security guards hesitated now, not sure if they were dealing with a lunatic or a miracle. Finally, one of them stepped forward, exchanged a look with Richard, then reluctantly placed 2 fingers on the pale wrist of the woman inside. The moment stretched endlessly. The rain, the whispers, the world, all froze. Then came the gasp. "Sir, she's warm." Chaos erupted. Mourners screamed, some fainted, and others rushed forward as Richard staggered back in disbelief. No, that's not possible." Daniel fell to his knees again, tears mixing with the rain. "Evelyn, come back to me." A faint sound came from inside the coffin. A fragile gasp, barely audible, but enough to silence everyone. Evelyn's fingers twitched, slow and uncertain, like something waking from a long nightmare. "Get the medics," Richard shouted, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "Now." The lid was pried open, revealing her face, pale but unmistakably alive. Her eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved soundlessly before her breath finally found shape. "Daniel!" The crowd broke into cries of disbelief and awe. The cameras flashed again, but this time not for tragedy, for resurrection. Richard's chest heaved. He couldn't look away. His mind spun back to the years before, when Daniel and Evelyn were inseparable, when he forbade her from seeing a man beneath her status. The fight, the storm, the accident, the silence that followed. He thought he had buried his mistakes. But now, standing in the rain, they had risen from the grave, Literally. The ambulance sirens cut through the air as paramedics lifted Evelyn from the coffin. Daniel clutched her hand, whispering her name as if afraid she'd slip away again. She squeezed his fingers weakly. But it was enough. As the paramedics rushed her into the ambulance, Richard stood there, drenched and trembling. The billionaire who once controlled everything was suddenly powerless, staring at the man who had defied death itself. And when Daniel turned to face him, there was no hate in his eyes, only exhaustion and a quiet, haunting truth. "You spent your life buying the world, Richard," he said softly. "But the one thing you couldn't buy was time, and you almost buried alive." The sirens faded into the distance, leaving only the whispering rain. The crowd began to disperse, stunned and silent. Richard dropped the rose he had been holding. It fell into muddy earth beside the empty coffin, a symbol of everything he'd lost and everything he still might have a chance to save. But as he turned toward the gates, something else caught his eye, a black car idling just beyond the cemetery fence. A man inside watched the scene through tinted glass, speaking quietly into an earpiece. "Phase 1 complete," the man said. "Proceed to step 2. Evelyn Moore must never wake up again." The car slipped away into the fog, and somewhere inside that speeding ambulance, Evelyn's pulse began to falter again. Daniel felt her hand go limp beneath his palm. Panic surged through him as the heart monitor let out a long, thin beat that sliced the noise of the moving ambulance. "No! No! No! Evelyn, stay with me," he cried, pressing down on her chest as the paramedics rushed into action. One of them, a young woman with trembling hands, shouted, "She's crashing. Get the defibrillator, now." The flashing red light filled a cramped space, reflecting off their faces tight with fear and determination. Daniel's heartbeat was racing faster than the monitor could catch. He could still see the faint rise and fall of her chest, the stubborn rhythm fighting not to disappear. The medic counted out loud, "Charging clear." The jolt ran through Evelyn's body, her back arching as if pulled by invisible strings. "Nothing. Again!" Daniel shouted. "Don't stop. Charging clear." Another jolt. This time, a flicker on the monitor. The line quivered, then steadied into weak, irregular beats. Daniel exhaled shakily, gripping her hand. Her fingers twitched once more. "That's it. That's my girl," he whispered, eyes burning. But the paramedics were exchanging uneasy looks. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow. They knew she wasn't safe yet. "We need to reach St. Mercy's now," one of them shouted to the driver. The siren wailed louder, cutting through the traffic ahead. Daniel glanced out the rear window. Through the blur of rain and city lights, a black car followed. Too close. Something in his gut tightened. The same car from the cemetery. Its headlights didn't waver, even as the ambulance sped through intersections. "Driver," he said urgently, "someone's following us." The driver looked back in the mirror, then frowned. Probably media. But Daniel knew better. He'd seen men like that before, silent, precise, and dangerous. Years ago, he had been part of Richard Moore's security detail before everything went wrong. He recognized that kind of pursuit. No, that's not media. He grabbed the first thing he could find, a small metal toolbox from under the bench, and moved toward the back door. "Keep her breathing," he told the medic. "Whatever happens, don't stop." "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Buying us time." He slammed the rear door open. Cold wind and rain tore through the ambulance. The car behind swerved closer, its engine growling. Daniel braced himself, waiting for it to pull up alongside. He saw the tinted window roll down, the faint gleam of something metallic aimed his way. He didn't think. He threw the toolbox with all his strength. It shattered against the windshield of the pursuing car. The vehicle swerved violently, tires screeching on the wet road, before slamming into a lamppost. Flames burst out from the hood. Daniel slammed the door shut again, breathing hard. The medic stared at him in shock, but he didn't explain. There was no time for that. He just sank beside Evelyn, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. "You're not dying again," he whispered fiercely. "Not when I just got you back." The ambulance roared through the storm, until finally the glowing red cross of St. Mercy's Hospital came into view. Nurses and doctors were already waiting at the entrance. As they wheeled her inside, Daniel followed, his clothes soaked, his face pale with exhaustion. Inside the emergency ward, chaos reigned, voices shouting orders, machines beeping, and the air thick with antiseptic and urgency. Daniel stood at the window of the operating room, hands pressed to the glass, watching as they worked on her. Each passing second felt like a lifetime. Behind him, a deep, measured voice spoke. "You should not be here." Daniel turned sharply. Richard Moore stood there, coat dripping rainwater, eyes dark and hollow. "You followed us," Daniel said coldly. "I had to. She's my daughter." Daniel stepped closer, his anger barely contained. "Your daughter? You almost buried her alive." Richard's lips tightened. "And you, what are you, Daniel? A savior? Or just a ghost who crawled out of my past to humiliate me?" Daniel's voice broke into a quiet snarl. "You don't get to talk about humiliation. 10 years ago, you destroyed everything we had because you couldn't stand the thought of her loving someone beneath her class. You sent men after me. You remember that? You made sure I lost everything. And now you almost killed her the same way." Richard's eyes flickered, a crack in his armor. "I didn't know she was alive," he said finally, softer. "I saw the reports. I saw her body. What was I supposed to believe?" "You were supposed to believe in her," Daniel said. "You were supposed to look beyond what your money told you to see." The words hit harder than Richard wanted to admit. He looked through the glass, watching Evelyn's fragile body under the surgical lights. For the first time in his life, his wealth meant nothing. Suddenly, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, and a low alarm began to pulse. Doctors shouted for backup generators. Daniel's instincts kicked in. "That's not normal," he said quickly. "Hospitals like this have redundancy systems." Someone cut the power. "What are you talking about?" Richard asked, but Daniel was already moving. He dashed into the corridor, scanning for anything out of place. Then he saw them. 2 men in maintenance uniforms moving toward the ICU wing with a stretcher that didn't belong there. He recognized their stance, their calm precision. "Security!" he shouted, but the hallway was empty. He sprinted forward, grabbing one of the men by the shoulder. The man spun, a flash of silver in his hand. A knife. Daniel ducked instinctively. The blade grazed his cheek. He slammed his elbow into the attacker's ribs and sent him crashing into a gurney. The other man lunged, trying to push the stretcher toward a side door, but Daniel caught him before he could escape. The sheet on the stretcher fell away, revealing not medical equipment, but a syringe filled with something dark. Adrenaline surged through him. "You were sent to finish her," Daniel hissed. The man smirked, blood trickling from his lip. "Orders are orders." Before Daniel could respond, a security guard finally appeared. The intruders bolted down the hallway. Daniel ran after them, chasing through the emergency wing, dodging nurses and startled patients. The corridor echoed with the slap of footsteps and the blare of alarms. They burst through the side door into the parking lot. One of the men pulled a gun, firing once. The bullet whizzed past Daniel's ear, hitting the ambulance behind him. Daniel dove for cover, grabbed a loose crowbar from the ground, and swung it with everything he had. The gun clattered away. The man fell, groaning, but the other one escaped, disappearing into the darkness just as police sirens began to scream in the distance. Daniel stood there, drenched in sweat and rain, chest heaving. His cheek burned where the knife had cut him. He looked toward the glowing hospital windows, heart still pounding. Evelyn was in there, fighting for her life, and someone wanted to make sure she lost. Richard appeared at the door, breathing heavily, escorted by 2 officers. His eyes widened at the scene, the fallen man, the weapon, the chaos. What the hell happened? Daniel wiped his face. Someone tried to kill her again. Richard's expression hardened. For the first time, Daniel saw not arrogance, but something darker, fear. "Then it's not over," Richard murmured. "They're coming for her and for us." Daniel stared at him. "Who are they?" Richard hesitated, his jaw tightening. "People I thought were loyal. The board, the investors." Evelyn discovered something. Something she wasn't supposed to. Daniel stepped closer, voice low. What did she find, Richard? Before Richard could answer, the hospital doors flew open. A nurse ran toward them, panic in her eyes. Her heart rate's dropping again. We're losing her. Daniel and Richard exchanged one look, fear, guilt, and desperate resolve blending into silence, before running back inside as the monitors began to scream once more. The world inside a hospital room was painted in white and blue light, sterile, trembling, alive with the beeping rhythm of machines that refused to give up. Evelyn lay still, her face pale as porcelain, her chest rising weakly beneath a maze of wires. Around her, doctors moved in tense silence, every second heavy with consequence. Daniel stood near the glass, fists clenched, staring at the fragile thread of life that bound her to the world. Richard was beside him, shoulders sagged, face drawn tight with helplessness. For the first time, the billionaire who once commanded entire empires looked like nothing more than a man, broken, guilty, and terrified. "I can't lose her again," Richard said, his voice barely a whisper. Daniel turned to him. "Then help me save her. Tell me what you're hiding." Richard looked down, trembling slightly. She wasn't supposed to die. Evelyn had uncovered something, documents, records, something that could destroy more holdings. There were offshore accounts, illegal funding. She came to me, furious. She said she'd expose it all, unless I made it right. Daniel's jaw tightened. "And you didn't?" Richard's voice cracked. "I tried, but someone else got to her first. She called me that night, said someone was following her. Then the car went off the bridge." Daniel's eyes darkened. "So it wasn't an accident?" "No," Richard whispered, his face pale. It was a warning. A cold silence fell between them, the kind that crushes hope and forces truth into the open. The machines inside the room suddenly spiked, Evelyn's pulse racing erratically. Doctors rushed in, adjusting tubes, calling for stabilizers. Daniel pressed his forehead against the glass, his breath fogging the surface. "Come on, Evelyn," he whispered. "You've fought harder than this before. Don't let them win." He closed his eyes and remembered the girl she used to be, fearless, stubborn, always chasing storms instead of hiding from them. He remembered the night they planned to run away, her laughter echoing under the city lights, her promise, asterisk, "If we ever get separated, find me where the rain starts." Asterisk. He turned toward the window. Rain was falling again, soft, steady, like a heartbeat. Something deep inside him stirred. "Richard," he said suddenly, "do you still own the hotel by the river?" Richard blinked, confused. "The Arcadia?" "Yes, why?" "That's where she went that night. That's where it started. We need to go there." Richard hesitated, glancing toward the ICU. "I can't leave her." "She'll die if we don't," Daniel said firmly. "Whoever did this, they'll try again. You know that. The answer's at the Arcadia. We find it, we save her." Richard's eyes searched it for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Let's go." They left the hospital under a cloak of storm clouds, a black car waiting in the shadows. Richard's driver hesitated when he saw Daniel, but one glare from his employer silenced any questions. The city stretched before them like a labyrinth of glass and rain, every streetlight flickering against the wet pavement. The Arcadia Hotel loomed over the river like a ghost, tall, elegant, and cold. Its lights were dim, the lobby empty except for the faint hum of the generator. Richard swiped his key card and led Daniel to the elevator. The air was heavy, thick with secrets. Evelyn was last seen on the 42nd floor. Richard said quietly, "In the executive suite." She said she found something hidden in the files there. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway was eerily silent. The carpet muffled their footsteps. Daniel's instincts prickled again, the same feeling he'd had when the black car followed the ambulance. They reached the suite. Richard unlocked the door. The moment they stepped inside, Daniel froze. Something was off, too neat, too still. The faint smell of gun oil lingered in the air. He gestured for Richard to stay back and moved forward cautiously. The room was spotless, except for the desk, a sleek black surface with a laptop still plugged in. the screen glowing faintly. On it, a folder labeled "Idem." Evidence blinked. Daniel clicked it open. Dozens of files appeared. Scanned bank statements, audio recordings, offshore accounts, and one document stamped with the seal of Moore Holdings' primary investor group. It wasn't just corruption. It was conspiracy. Political figures, corporate bribery, money laundering, all tied back to Richard's empire. Richard's breath hitched. Good God! She was trying to expose them, Daniel said. This is why they tried to silence her. Before Richard could respond, the suite door clicked shut behind them. They spun around, and there he was. A man in a tailored suit stepped out from the shadows, the faint gleam of a gun in his hand. His face was calm, professional. The same man Daniel had seen in the black car. Mr. Moore, the man said, voice smooth as silk. You should have stayed at the funeral. Richard stiffened. You work for them. I work for survival, the man replied. And right now, that means making sure this never sees daylight. Daniel moved subtly between him and Richard. You'll have to kill both of us. The man smiled slightly. If that's what it takes. He raised a gun, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed a metal vase from the table and hurled it. The shot rang out, deafening, shattering the mirror behind them. Glass rained down like ice. Daniel tackled the man, the gun skidding across the floor. They struggled. Two bodies slamming against furniture, fists colliding with brutal force. Richard stood frozen for a heartbeat before grabbing the gun. His hands shook, but his eyes were steady now. Enough, he said. It ends here. The man on the floor sneered. You can't stop it. Moore, the bore will erase you. Your empire will burn. Then let it burn, Richard said coldly. I built it with lies. I'll bury it with truth. He fired once, not into the man, but into the wall beside his head. Tell them I'm coming, he said. Tell them I'm done being their puppet. Daniel stared at him, breathless. For the first time, he saw something human flicker behind Richard's eyes. Not arrogance, but redemption. They grabbed a laptop and ran. Alarms began to blare through the building. Someone had triggered a security alert. By the time they reached the lobby, police sirens were echoing outside. Richard handed the files to Daniel. Get this to the press. I'll handle the rest. What are you talking about? Daniel demanded. We do this together. Richard shook his head. No, they'll come for me, not you. If she wakes up, she needs you. Not a father haunted by sins he can't undo. Before Daniel could argue, Richard turned and walked out the front doors, straight into the flashing red and blue lights. Cameras flashed as he raised his hands, surrendering himself to a storm of questions and chaos. Daniel stood there, frozen in the doorway, the laptop clutched to his chest, his heart pounding. Outside, Richard Moore, the man who once ruled everything, was finally stripped of power but not of purpose. Hours later, back at St. Mercy's, Daniel returned to Evelyn's bedside. The rain had stopped. The night was quiet, filled only with the soft of the machines that still guarded her fragile life. He sank into the chair beside her, exhaustion finally catching up to him. He took her hand gently, tracing the faint pulse beneath her skin. It's over, he whispered. Your father's facing it. The truth's coming out. You did it, Evelyn. You saved more than you know. Her eyes fluttered. For a moment, he thought it was a dream, but then her fingers curled weakly around his. Her voice, soft and broken, slipped through the silence. Daniel, he leaned forward, tears glistening. I'm here. Her lips trembled into the faintest smile. I told you, find me where the rain starts. Daniel's throat tightened. And I did. The monitors steadied. Her breathing deepened. Outside the window, dawn broke. Soft gold over the city, washing the world in quiet light. For the first time in years, Daniel felt peace. Hours later, news headlines would explode across every network. Billionaire Richard Moore confesses to corporate crimes, protects whistleblower daughter. The world would call it a scandal. Daniel knew better. It was salvation. But he didn't care about the noise outside that room. All he cared about was the fragile warmth of the hand he held. Proof that love, Even buried under lies, money and time could still rise from a grave. And as the first sunlight touched Evelyn's face, Daniel whispered, "You came back to me." Her eyes opened, faint but clear, and for a long, breathless moment, they just looked at each other. Two souls had fought death, corruption, and time, and one, somewhere far away, in a dark room lit only by screens, the man from the black car watched the news unfold. He lit a cigarette, eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," he murmured into his earpiece. "The Moors may be finished, but Daniel Reeves, he's just become a problem." The voice on the other end was cold, then removed the problem. The screen went dark. Inside St. Mercy's, Daniel held Evelyn closer as the rain began to fall again. Not as a storm, but as a soft reminder that even after everything, some stories don't end. They simply begin again where the rain starts.